You remember the argument clearly, the words, the tone, the moment it shifted. But then they say it never happened. And slowly, without quite noticing, you stop trusting what you remember. That is not a flaw in your memory. It is something being done to your memory. Gaslighting is not about confusion. It is a systematic dismantling of your trust in your own perception, one small contradiction at a time. There is a reason gaslighting is so difficult to name while it is happening. It does not announce itself. It arrives in the gaps between conversations, in the small moments where your certainty used to be. You say something happened. Someone you love says it did not. And because love asks us to give the benefit of the doubt, you give it. Once, then again, until the habit of doubting yourself becomes automatic. This is why so many people only recognize gaslighting in retrospect. Looking back, the pattern becomes visible. But inside it, everything feels like a personal failure of perception. You think, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I misread things. Maybe I am the problem. What this episode is about is why that thought is almost always the intended result, not a conclusion you arrived at through honest self-reflection, an outcome that was engineered quietly over time. And the reason it is so hard to see is that it works by replacing your framework for seeing with someone else's. The term comes from a 1944 film, and before that a 1938 play by Patrick Hamilton, in which a husband systematically manipulates his wife into believing she is losing her mind. He dims the gaslights, then insists she imagined it. The name stuck because the mechanism is so precise. Reality is not denied all at once. It is adjusted gradually until the target no longer trusts their own senses enough to challenge the person doing the adjusting. Psychologist Robin Stern, in her 2007 book, The Gaslight Effect, was among the first to translate this into clinical language. She identified the core pattern as a relationship dynamic in which one person persistently denies, trivializes, or reframes the other's experience until that person begins accepting the distorter's version of events as true. What makes this so psychologically corrosive is what it targets. It does not attack your behavior. It attacks your perception. And when perception goes, so does the capacity to evaluate whether anything is wrong at all. Research on memory helps explain why this works so reliably. Elizabeth Loftus, across decades of experimental work on eyewitness testimony and memory reconstruction, demonstrated that human memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction, vulnerable to suggestion, social pressure, and repeated confident contradiction. When someone you trust insists your memory is wrong, the brain does not simply dismiss the challenge. It updates the record. That is not weakness. That is how memory was built to function in a social world. Gaslighting exploits a feature, not a flaw. Over time, gaslighting does something deeper than distort individual memories. It restructures the self. Bessel van der Kolk, in The Body Keeps the Score, published in 2014, described how chronic interpersonal trauma does not just wound the psyche. It reorganizes it, shaping how the nervous system encodes threat and safety. Long-term gaslighting produces exactly this kind of embodied confusion, a state where the person has learned, at the level of reflex, to distrust their own signals. What surprises me about this research is how physical the consequences are. People who have been chronically gaslit often describe a constant low-grade anxiety, a sense of being slightly wrong about everything, a hesitation before expressing any opinion. These are not personality traits. They are adaptations. The mind learned to pause, to check, to defer, because certainty became dangerous. Jung, across several works, returned to the idea that what remains unconscious does not disappear. It shapes behavior from below. The person who has been gaslit often cannot name what happened to them, but they feel it constantly, as self-doubt, as social withdrawal, as an inability to trust even clearly safe relationships. John Bowlby's work on attachment, particularly in attachment and loss, helps frame why this bind is so deep. Attachment systems evolved to orient us toward caregivers as sources of accurate information about reality. When the caregiver is also the source of distortion, the system faces an impossible conflict. Trust the person, or trust your perception. For someone who loves deeply, that is not a real choice. So the mind makes the only choice that preserves the relationship. It surrenders the perception. The capacity for accurate perception is not destroyed by gaslighting. It is suppressed, and suppression is reversible. The first step is almost embarrassingly simple, and yet it is the one most people resist: external verification. Keeping a journal. Sending yourself a time-stamped message after a difficult conversation. Talking to a trusted person outside the relationship. Not because you need proof to show anyone, but because you need to restore the habit of treating your own account as credible. You are rebuilding trust in your own witness. Therapists working with survivors of emotional abuse often describe this phase as a kind of archaeological process. You are not constructing a new self. You are uncovering the one that was already there, underneath a layer of learned self-doubt. Viktor Frankl, writing in Man's Search for Meaning in 1946, described the human capacity to find the self intact even after extreme conditions had stripped away almost everything external. The self, he argued, is not merely a product of how others treat us. It has a residue that outlasts even sustained pressure. That is not a small idea. It means the erosion was never as complete as it felt. And if you find yourself recognizing any of this, the hesitation, the automatic self-correction, the quiet sense that your version of events is probably wrong, that recognition itself is worth taking seriously. Perception that notices it has been disturbed is already beginning to repair. If these ideas resonate, this channel exists to help you build a clearer map of your own mind. The research is here. The pattern has a name. And naming it is the first thing the pattern was trying to prevent.